I'd like to take a quick opportunity to introduce myself. My name's Scott Jones, work for Creative Energies. I do solar photovoltaic technical sales and design work, plus energy storage development. I have a fairly significant portfolio of projects under my belt. I've managed several community solar programs in the past and also currently sit on the board of directors for the Utah Solar Energy Association. That is intended to help craft policy and protect our industry and carry the credential of NABCEP, which is the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. There's 2 people in the state that currently hold that credential, so you are in good hands. I'll do my best to dispel any myths that are out there. And we also have solar on our own home and on our office building downtown. Creative Energies is thrilled to be celebrating our 20th year designing and installing solar. So that's pretty ancient. We would be considered fossils in the industry. We're also a certified B Corporation and proud to join some of the other leaders here that are shown on the board, like Ben & Jerry's and Patagonia, in using business as a force for good. Creative Energies also has a give back program. For every system that we install, we donate a solar home kit to a family in need in underserved and developing countries. So a little bit about us. We have done some installations that you see here from Alaska to Antarctica, although our primary area of operation is in the Rocky Mountain region with offices in Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming. So let's dive right into the content of our webinar here. Some of the challenges to going solar. So this webinar is intended to help educate and demystify the following challenges that a person might face when they're considering solar. Solar is a high growth industry and has many good and then some bad players. So we hope to offer some honest guidance to help set the record straight. Solar is technically complex. For the layman, there's some unfamiliar technology. It does entail several components. You are at the mercy of the designer and the company you're working with to give you accurate solar production estimates. So with the large variety of folks out there doing solar now, it can be a daunting process to select a reputable contractor. Understanding the solar economics can be a bit of a challenge with state and federal tax credits to navigate, as well as net metering policies that are out there. There's also a bunch of myths in the industry, and again, we will do our best to set those straight. Let's dive into it. Photovoltaics, photovol what? Photovoltaics is simply a mashup of the words light and electricity. Photo meaning light and voltaic meaning electricity, or the simple act of converting light into electricity. And it's pretty cool, I think, that Einstein actually won the Nobel Prize in 1921 for his discovery of the photoelectric effect, not the theory of relativity. So kind of an interesting tidbit there. Although energy efficiency of solar panels and solar equipment has dramatically improved over time, the fundamental effect of the photoelectric effect hasn't really changed. Let's talk about how solar works. So solar photovoltaic modules produce DC electricity. That DC electricity needs to be inverted into alternating current, or AC electricity. So solar panels up here on your roof, producing DC power while the sun is shining, down through conduit to what we call an inverter. The job of the inverter is to change that DC into alternating current, AC electricity, which ties into your home and the meter out here on the exterior of your home. As you're using devices, as those loads like your washer, dryer, your television are running in the home, they're gobbling up that clean solar energy first, and then any surplus that the home is not using is fed back through the meter, back out to the utility where your neighbors can use those. That power stays localized, and you receive a credit for the kilowatt hours that are exported back to the grid. In a typical solar system, you can also monitor the system's performance. Sorry, I might have just lost the slide there. Okay. So here's some basic solar terminology. Here's a solar panel. What we call a panel in the industry, we actually call a module. If you talk to an electrician, you say, hey, I need help with this panel, they're going to look at the breaker box. So we try to call a solar panel up on the roof a solar module. If you look in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, this is an individual wafer cell. That is a solar cell. A typical residential solar panel consists of, or module, consists of 60 individual wafer cells, 6 wide by 10 tall. That solar module, as a collection of modules on your roof, becomes the solar array. In this instance, the solar array is split into 2 subarrays, which make up the entire solar array. Here we see a few different types of solar modules. Starting on the left, working our way to the right, the first 3 that you see are intended for residential applications. The very first one is what we would call a polycrystalline solar module. So when you grow silicon, which is used in the wafer cells of any module, we can either grow a polysilicon or a monosilicon. Polysilicon, which is this blue panel that you see on the left, the crystals are grown randomly, essentially like in a vat, like a bathtub, where those crystals grow. They slice up into individual wafer cells, the random crystal structures into individual wafer cells, and that's why you see this blue hueish appearance. A little bit lower efficiency with a polycrystalline module, also a lower power output and a lower cost. So if you have ample room on your roof, this might be a good option. Most folks, however, are looking at the 2 center modules, which consist of monocrystalline silica. Monocrystalline is just that. The crystal is grown as one pure monocrystal with no gaps in between crystals, much more efficient, a better aesthetic appearance. The cell comes out all black. And I would say the bulk of folks that install solar use this high power aesthetic module that's all black. As we continue to move right, as you get into some higher power modules, you'll gain a little bit of efficiency by using a white backer paper, which is why you pick out on that higher power module the grid pattern. Solar likes cool temperatures, and that white backer helps it achieve a lower temperature and therefore a higher efficiency. These modules usually come in at a slightly higher price, and depending on your preference for aesthetics, we could go either way with the middle 2 options. On the far right, we see a commercial solar module, and this is usually what's installed on a large, membrane roof or for larger commercial applications. We have seen some players in the market pitching high power modules, but using a commercial solar module on a residence. We advise against that. They're not really intended for residential application. And within any manufacturer of solar modules, there are a wide variety of modules available, kind of like, Mercedes. If you were to purchase a Mercedes-Benz, there's the E-Class series, there's a variety of series. You always want to ask for these data sheets, which I'm showing on the screen now. The data sheets will inform you of the nameplate rating of the module. It'll also inform you of the warranty. What you really want here is a tier 1 manufacturer with a 25-year power output warranty. We could get into some of the more technical aspects that are illustrated here on a data sheet. And if anybody wants to geek out at the end of the presentation, we could talk about degradation rates, temperature coefficients, standard versus normal operating cell temperatures, that kind of thing. But always ask for a data sheet when you're researching solar. This slide shows typical inverter options that are out there. About a decade ago, people were installing string systems. String systems were simply strung together like a Christmas tree lights, where if one goes bad, the whole entire system dims down to that weakest link. Frankly, nobody is installing old string systems anymore. About 10 years ago, microinverters on the right-hand side of the screen came onto the market. And those were a direct answer to combating the downsides to a string system. We call these module level power electronics, or MLPEs for short. So microinverters do the heavy lifting in the system. They invert the DC to AC at every single module on the roof. So you're going to see one MLPE, one microinverter behind every single panel on the array. And what that does is compartmentalizes the effects, the negative effects of shade or production loss from an equipment failure, or say a neighbor's Frisbee flies up on the roof. Rather than that shade that's cast on the module affecting the entire array, it is compartmentalized to that one module. A few years later, SolarEdge came onto the market offering a hybrid system. SolarEdge is the architecture that's shown here or illustrated on the left-hand side of the screen. With a SolarEdge system, we have a central inverter, which is the device, the larger white device on the left. And then we also pair power optimizers. You'll get one power optimizer per solar module on the roof. And these two systems basically do the exact same thing, two different approaches by which you'll achieve the same end result of compartmentalizing problems, mitigating shade, and maximizing performance. The SolarEdge system is the architecture that we lean toward, although we can install either. And I'd be happy to walk folks through the benefits of either or both towards the tail end of the presentation. So net metering. A good net metering policy makes solar economical, and that is without a battery system. So we really do rely on the Public Service Commission to ensure that we have a favorable net metering policy that helps us continue to deploy solar and for folks to be compensated for their solar energy. So net metering allows solar homeowners to receive credit for the excess solar energy that's sent out to the grid. When you're consuming power from the grid, it happens just like it normally does now without solar. However, when you're exporting a surplus, you bank those credits away and you're billed for the difference in energy usage expressed in kilowatt hours, the difference between what you push out to the grid and what you consume from the grid. Those credits bank up, they carry forward from month to month and are usually reset about once a year. In Utah, those credits are typically reset in March, and then you go right back into the high production season. Even if you are net energy zero or net energy positive, a minimum monthly charge still does apply. And in Utah, for example, we see about a $9 minimum monthly bill just for the benefit of being connected to the grid. This is an example of a bill that's post solar installation. On this example, you can see that the solar came online early February, and the bar graph that you're seeing over here on the right-hand side of the screen is historical usage. It peaked here in July, August, September with air conditioning usage, started to ramp down, and as the solar came online, rather than going back up, the solar offset all of that energy. You would see here that in this example, this is a bill that was read in June and July. Used about 491 kilowatt hours from the grid, exported back about 360 for a net consumption of 130. Because those kilowatt hours from the previous months carried forward, they applied the remaining balance there, and then you ended up with a net billed usage of 0. Down here at the bottom of the bill, you see that 335 kilowatt hours remain as excess power that you can use going forward. And that's essentially how a net metering bill would read. Everybody still see that screen okay? Kind of toggled away there for a moment. This shows there's a lot going on in this graphic to kind of help wrap your mind around. Those vertical bars are historical usage from the grid. The top of that yellow bell curve that you see is solar that's being produced. And you can see in March, April, May, June, the solar is producing more energy than the home has consumed historically. And those credits then carry forward through the following bill cycles and are applied to June, July, August, September, where air conditioning is kicked in and the system isn't quite keeping up with the air conditioning usage. However, that net bank that you'd accumulated in the spring months carry forward and are applied to the summer months. And then as we get into the winter solstice around December, the system then drops down to its lower production. At the bottom of the bell curve here, you see energy that is, we've color coded as orange. That's the ratio of solar that we're showing the home has consumed directly off of the solar system. On average, we see about a 60-40 split of energy consumption that goes out to the grid. So about 60% of the solar that's produced goes out to the grid, and about 40% is consumed by the home in real time. So this slide here gets into system monitoring. On the left, you see what a solar edge monitoring looks like on a laptop or desktop. On the right, you see what in-phase microinverter system would look like on a smartphone. Both architectures offer monitoring on laptops, tablets, what have you. You can also look at a bird's eye view of the physical layout, and the panels are going to be, or the modules are going to be color coded to help you identify if there is a production problem. Right here, I'd like to show what a quick video on what solar looks like on a roof and how it works. So here we see sunlight hitting the panels, that DC staying DC off of the roof. This would be similar to a sun power optimized system, going through the conductors and conduits down to the inverter. That inverter is changing it into alternating current. Alternating current carrying that energy back to the main service panel, where it can either go into the house or back out to the grid. If it goes back out to the grid, this is where you're banking credits that can then be pulled back in the evening as the sun goes down. And that's a pretty good illustration as to how solar works. Next up, how does a solar contractor go about designing the photovoltaic system? The very first step is a very detailed analysis of your energy usage. What we'll need here is at least one recent copy of a power bill. From there, we can extrapolate what your monthly usage looks like and compare that to our forecast energy production to see how the solar and your consumption ebbs and flows and what the economics will look like. After that energy review, we would want to conduct a detailed site analysis. This includes reviewing the orientation to south of the roof planes, the pitch of those roofs, any shade or roof obstacles that we need to work around, and the impact of that shade on the system's performance. Also, we'll look at structural considerations, meaning an assessment of the size and spacing of the rafters or the joists up in the roof, and a thorough, detailed inspection of the home's electrical system. We'll want to identify exactly how we'll tie this solar photovoltaic system into your home's electrical system. So beyond the site analysis, we then start looking at what equipment might make the most sense for the homeowner. This will be driven, the equipment selection will be driven by how much viable roof space we have, what the homeowner's preference are. If you prefer an all black panel, a budget panel, a premium panel, and then what the budget entails. So all of those variables will dictate what equipment we select, and we'll work with you to make sure that we're both on the same page and we're meeting your needs. And then we run all of the energy production through our sophisticated modeling software to give you some bankable energy production numbers. And this is a quick pie graph here that illustrates various forms of loss and those variables that go into how a system will perform. So a solar panel that's rated at, say, 340 watts, what that panel will produce in annual energy depends entirely on the location of the system and the quality of the site. So roof orientation, if it's oriented south versus east or west, we'll look at NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab database for the exact geolocation. We'll look at slope and pitch angle, shade factors, soiling or snow, and then again run that through our modeling software to give you accurate numbers. The economics of solar, you typically see a return on the investment under reasonable net metering policy somewhere between 9 and 11 years. It could be a little quicker or a little longer than that, but most usually come in right around 9 to 11 years. There is good federal tax credits currently that are offered and available for all eligible system costs. You see 26% back with no cap, and that's the residential renewable energy tax credit. Currently, we're in a step down phase out of the tax credit. So this year, you're still banking on 26% tax credit. Next year in 2021, that steps down to 22%. And unless legislation changes in 2022, 2 years from now, that tax credit is forecast to go away entirely. Your state may well offer some tax credits or incentives as well. Currently in Utah, there is a $1,600 tax credit available, and then depending on your state, there may be some additional utility incentives offered by your power company. I've included here a link to desireusa.org, and they are an excellent resource for exploring current tax incentives, both from your utility, from your state, and the feds. So highly recommend, if you'd like to look at incentives that are available, exploring that desireusa.org website. This is a pie graph here that illustrates the typical cost breakdown of a solar system. There's a lot of soft costs that go into a system here in the States, and hardware accounts for about 25% of the solar cost. So hardware is going to be your solar modules themselves, the inverter or inverters, the MLPEs, racking, flashing, rails, all of the conduits, conductors, and then we start looking at some of the other areas here like labor, permits, other costs and margins, overhead, and marketing and sales. So again, the hardware only represents about a quarter of the typical system cost.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
We have a couple of questions from Marilyn Marshall, but this one seems to be right in where you're talking right now. Do you happen to have any comparison numbers for fossil fuel incentives?
For fossil fuel, so how the government is incentivizing fossil fuels, or?
I'm honestly not sure. Marilyn, if you're listening, do you want to clarify that real quick? She also was asking earlier on, she has panels on her roof and she's grandfathered into the net metering. Lucky lady.
That's great.
She was wondering, she was thinking of going with an electric car, an all electric car, and was asking if she should look at a separate system to charge it to keep her net metering the same with Rocky Mountain Power. And if you had any idea how much power is needed to charge an electric car.
Yeah, those are great questions, and those come up very, very frequently. So starting with anybody that's in your position where you've grandfathered into Rocky Mountain Power's net metering rate schedule, known as Schedule 135, as long we can expand the system, that's no problem. We can readily expand that system out and remain grandfathered under that net metering policy as long as we don't cross this arbitrary line of a 10 kW system. And 10 kW is a pretty robust system size. So we can expand the system up to that size and remain grandfathered. If we cross that system size, if we exceed 10 kW, then you are subject to the new transitional policy that's out there. And I'd be happy to work with you about how much to forecast how much additional capacity you might need to offset the needs of that electric vehicle. For ease of math, a typical electric car uses about 3,500 kilowatt hours for every 10,000 miles that car is driven. And assuming that you're charging that vehicle exclusively on site at home, that would equate to a 2.75 kW system expansion to cover the needs of the car. That would equate to roughly somewhere in between 5 and 8 panels, and I'd be happy to, or modules. I'd be happy to walk through and help you calculate what exactly that would need. But yeah, expansions are certainly viable. We can insulate you from switching away from the grandfathered status to help make sure that you're maximizing your investment there and don't end up getting a lesser compensation rate. Hope that answered the question adequately, but again, happy to talk with you in more detail about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
You bet. Let's move on to some common myths that are floating around out there. One of the first ones is, solar will provide power to my house because I have panels during a grid outage. And that is untrue unless you have a battery storage system. The reason that solar legally has to stop producing energy during a grid failure is known as an anti-islanding law, and that is intended to protect linemen as they come out to do repair work. They need to know that the grid or the lines that they're working on are not energized. If we have power plants in the form of solar systems up on folks' roofs and they're feeding the grid, that could pose a real significant danger to the linemen. So legally, those systems have to stop working during a power outage. If you do install batteries, that's the way to allow your system to continue to function during a grid failure. And we can talk about that more. There are some gimmicky inverter products out there that say, hey, we can provide power to your house during a grid failure without the benefit of batteries. But those we do not recommend, and they do not provide consistent and reliable power during a grid failure. Next common myth would be smart thermostats will significantly lower my energy usage. I've seen this as a common tactic for some less scrupulous players out there that say, hey, we're going to design a solar system. I know your goal is to offset 100% of your energy needs. We're going to design a system that offsets 75% of those needs and then throw in a free Nest thermostat or some other smart thermostat. And because of this smart thermostat, you're going to lower your bills by 25%. And then now this smaller system is going to offset 100% of your needs. That's not true. So the thermostat, one of these smart thermostats are pretty cool, but they entirely depend on the user's inputs and the set points of the thermostat. In some cases, these smart thermostats can actually increase your usage. So be wary of some of these claims that adding a smart thermostat will make a dramatic impact. They may make an impact, but not nearly what we're seeing from some of these pitches out there. The next common myth is that solar loans with low interest rates are awesome. And we see a lot of these 2.99% rates that are out there. If you're seeking a loan from the solar contractor, oftentimes you're going to see expensive dealer fees or loan origination fees rolled into the cost. So be leery of loans with low rates. If you're getting that loan from the solar contractor themselves, as you're probably paying somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 20% is a typical dealer fee that's rolled into the cost of your loan. Creative Energies has never offered loans because it just feels icky, but we could point you to some certified B Corporation companies out there like the Clean Energy Credit Union that does not include any loan origination fees or dealer fees. So at face value, these low interest rate loans look appealing, but be careful of some of the hidden gotchas there in the form of high expenses of the solar system. Next myth would be the cost of re-roofing or re-shingling my roof can be included into my federal tax credit. To be clear here, the Solar Energy Industry Association, or SEIA for short, has ruled on this topic, and unequivocally the answer is no. Including the cost of re-roofing should not be included in your solar tax credit. That is not the spirit of the tax code, nor is it how the tax code was intended. We would suggest that you consult with your CPA to see how they interpret the tax code, but I can tell you SEIA's official ruling is that it should not be applied. Essentially, you would need to reshingle regardless of solar or not. So be careful there. It's a bit like speeding down the highway. You might get away with it, but if you get caught, there could certainly be some penalties you'd be looking at. And the final myth I'd like to cover here is that all of the solar power from my system that's being produced goes back to the utility. And that's not exactly true. What we call self-consumption or energy behind the meter, a good portion of the solar energy that's produced is consumed in real time by your home. if you're installing a system that offsets 100% of your needs, usually about 40% of that energy is consumed by devices and 60% goes back out to the grid. If you have a system that's only offsetting half of your energy needs, that ratio of self-consumption goes up dramatically. So those are some of those common myths I'd like to dispel, and we'll move on from there. Next topic is energy storage systems. So Creative Energies has been designing and installing customized battery backup systems for close to 20 years. We got started doing a bunch of off-grid cabins and ranches, well pumps, those kind of things. And now we're proud to be installing the Tesla Powerwall system. We'll be glazing over a general review of battery backup today, and we'll be hosting another webinar next Thursday, the 23rd, focusing more on battery storage. To be clear, batteries are not required for a home photovoltaic system. So if you're looking at going solar, you don't need to include the cost or the expense of batteries, but they're available out there, and we'd be happy to design one for you. They can be retrofitted at any point down the road, and they have some really cool features that we can kind of glaze over real quickly here. So the Tesla Powerwall, it is a completely automated system that allows that installs easily and requires no maintenance from the homeowner. It stores solar energy to continuously power your home, whether it's daytime or night. And you can use that Powerwall to reduce your reliance on the grid and create a zero emission home. One of the other benefits of a battery system is that it reduces your electricity bill if the utility company offers a time of use rate, or if they switch to a time of use rate down the road. So installing an energy storage system such as a Powerwall now will future-proof and insulate you from those rate changes. Tesla has really knocked it out of the park with an elegant monitoring platform. This slide shows what it would look like on your smartphone. You can seamlessly monitor both the Powerwall state of charge and the solar production, see what devices or what loads are being consumed, how the energy is flowing, whether it's going to the Powerwall, being used by the home, or going back to the grid. And they also offer over-the-air constant software updates, so the Powerwall is continuing to improve and adapt to your lifestyle. Did want to mention that the installation and design work for any battery system, even the Powerwall, is technically complicated, and the installation requires a lot of electrical labor. So it will require a detailed assessment of your home's electrical system. If you're looking at whole home backup, it probably requires multiple Powerwall units. It may well require a new main electrical service panel, but all of this does qualify for a 26% federal tax credit if installed this year. That tax credit is applied if the battery system is charged or fueled by solar rather than the grid. It's a non-trivial expense, but again, we'll be diving into more of those details on our next webinar Thursday, a week from today, Thursday the 23rd, focusing on battery storage. So that's kind of a hint at some of the battery stuff that we've got going on right now. Let's jump into a Q&A session. And Kelly, do we have some a list of questions that we can jump into right now?
We do, and actually a lot of them are to do with batteries.
Okay.
So, and I know this is a topic that we're going to be covering next week. So why don't I just, I'll give you some of these questions and then maybe do the short and sweet answer, and we can dive into those more in greater detail next week. To all the attendees, we are also going to do a follow-up email out to everyone. Also include a link so that people who are having issues with some audio can actually listen to the entire presentation. During that time, when you get that email, if you want to send us an email back with some questions regarding battery storage or backup that you may have, we can make sure that we cover those in the next week's session as well. So
Great.
Look for that email. It'll come shortly after. Just to hit some of these questions real quick, Scott. let's see, where do we go? Do we or can you install an independent system for a car?
Likely not. It can be done, but very technically challenging. You usually can't isolate the electric vehicle from the system as it exists. So really any load, whether it's a toaster or an electric vehicle, a hot tub, what have you, an air conditioning unit, is going to be fueled by the home, and it's best for us to tie in the solar photovoltaic system to the whole home, as well as the battery system as well can either tie into the whole home, or if you're looking at one single Powerwall unit or a smaller storage capacity, a portion of that home. So we would wire up what we call a dedicated load panel or a critical load panel, meaning we would isolate all of those loads that you want the batteries to power during a grid failure, and put those loads into that backup load panel. So that kind of addresses some of the question there about compartmentalizing an electric vehicle charger, the needs of the EV. But usually we tie in the whole solar system into the whole home, and then the battery portion into either the dedicated loads of the home or the whole home if you do multiple battery units. I hope that helps.
Okay, great. So we have a question from Robert as well. He just wants to clarify that if one already has a solar array, can you get another 26% break on the purchase of an installation of a battery?
Yes, you can, as long as the caveat there being that the battery has to be fueled by solar. If that battery is installed and is fed by the grid, it technically does not comply with the tax code. But if it's fueled by the solar, powered by the solar, it absolutely does qualify for that federal tax credit. And that's the way that we're installing these power walls right now, fed by solar.
Great. Okay, and I have a question here from Mac. He would love to hear the difference between inverters and microinverters.
Yeah, so again, the two leading technologies out there include MLPEs, or module level power electronics. A microinverter will do the heavy lifting multiple times. So let's say for our example that you've got 20 panels on the roof. If you have 20 microinverters, you have 20 devices on the roof that are doing that heavy lifting. And to be clear, the inverter in any system, whether it's a central inverter or a micro inverter, is the weak link in your system. That device, that inverter, is subject to failure, or at least some servicing. So we expect, from our experience, central inverters and micro inverters typically fail right around year 15. Could be a little quicker than that, could be later than that. Both options have good warranties. So if you look at a micro inverter system, they're warranted for 25 years for the equipment. Chances are almost 100% that those microinverters are going to fail over time. An optimized system with a central inverter, same deal. The inverter itself will fail, usually around year 15, but you're looking at one device that'll fail. The power optimizers on a central inverter system like SolarEdge are also warranted for 25 years, but they don't do the heavy lifting. An optimizer simply controls the current and voltage of the solar panel. It's just a buck boost technology, very rudimentary, very few parts in an optimizer. So when that inverter fails with the SolarEdge system and we come out to do service work, we don't even need to bring a ladder. We're out there, it's at ground level, we do our service work, the system's back up and running once we replace the motherboard or the inverter itself. And that's kind of the key difference between both. Again, the benefits of both microinverters or an optimized SolarEdge system are pretty well the same. It's just two different means by which you'll achieve that same end result of compartmentalizing production problems, whether it's from shade or a mechanical failure. We are strongly leaning towards the SolarEdge architecture. It's a little bit simpler, in our opinion, a little bit more elegant design, and a little bit more cost effective. So I hope that helps.
I have another question from Mac here, who is asking if you can further explain how the federal tax credit works. For example, do you receive a check back from the government?
So I'm a little reticent to give out tax advice. I would give our default answer there to, consult the advice of your CPA. But that said, it is a tax credit. So it's based on the residential renewable energy tax credit is based on your tax appetite. From my experience, when you file your taxes at the end of the year, all you're doing is really squaring up with Uncle Sam. So, say your tax credit is $5,000 that you're going to see back. So all other things considered, when you file those taxes to the feds, if you've paid in excess of that $5,000, and then you apply for the residential renewable tax credit, and it says 5,000, you would get that back as a refund check. Or if you have a tax liability, barring solar, that says you owe $5,000, then when you click the button that says, yes, I installed solar this year, my tax credit should be 5,000, that reduces your liability that you would otherwise had to pay in. And that's essentially how it works. But again, please seek the advice of your tax professional for guidance on that.
Great. Okay, I have another question here from Marilyn, and then I think we're probably getting close to where we should cut this off. But like I mentioned, you will be getting a follow-up email. Feel free to respond to that and send us your list of questions or even list of topics that you would like us to cover in the future for these little mini seminars we've got going on. So Marilyn's last question is, if she remembers right, Rocky Mountain Power limits their Blue Sky assistance to 20% of power usage. Is that true? And do you work with the Blue Sky program?
So I'm sorry, can you repeat that question for me again? I heard something about 20%.
Absolutely not. Yes. So, if she remembers correctly, Rocky Mountain Power limits their Blue Sky assistance to 20% of power usage. Is that true? And do you work with the Blue Sky program?
Sure. So I'll answer this question in reverse order. Yes, absolutely. We have done, Creative Energies has installed numerous Blue Sky systems that we've designed that have benefited from Rocky Mountain Power's Blue Sky grant. The Blue Sky grant is intended to reward communities and essentially nonprofits to install clean renewable energy, whether it's solar or wind, hydro, thermal, but most are going to be solar systems. Their funding varies case by case. As a general rule of thumb, I mean, you would make an application to the Blue Sky program, but their funding is really dictated by how they feel about the project, whether or not it's a good community, feel good project or not. We've seen funding where they've offered 30% of as a grant. We've seen funding where they go up to 80% or more. I know there's been a couple outliers where they've funded at 100%, but that's an anomaly. So they're really case by case, and it would be kind of dictated by the nonprofit's budget and tolerance for how much they can afford and what they're seeking. And Rocky Mountain Power has been fairly good about working with the nonprofit to figure out what makes the most sense. So they'll go back and forth to come up with the solution, but generally you're right. Any more than 80% funding is about the upper threshold that I've seen from the utility. Well, Kelly, it sounds like that's kind of the wrap on the Q&A session. If there's additional, I'd be happy to address those. If you'd like to learn more about Creative Energies, please visit our website. It's listed there on the screen, cesolar.com. We've got a lot of good resources on our website, and if you're interested in an estimate for solar, we do those complimentarily. There's a link on our website as well. And as a reminder, we're going to be hosting another one of these webinars focused on battery storage next Thursday, the 23rd. So please look for an email invitation, and we'd love to have you join us and learn more about storage. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining today. It's been a pleasure speaking and presenting to you today, and we hope we've really helped dispel some of the myths and help you make a better informed decision about solar going forward. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.